Walsh here for our weekly Chairman's Update. We've been doing a little bit more than weekly lately. We've been talking to candidates running for statewide office, and I'm very happy to say that in this segment, we're talking with Pete Serrano, who's running for State Attorney General here in Washington. Pete, you're a friend of the party. You've been active for a long time. Some people are just getting to know you as you get into the kind of teeth of this campaign for Attorney General. But your background, that most people know, is with the Silent Majority Foundation. Just take a second, tell everybody about the Silent Majority Foundation and how that started and what it does, and will continue to do going forward.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. So Silent Majority Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit that I and a couple of friends started mid-pandemic to stand for people. We saw, I remember I was working out in my buddy's garage gym because real gyms didn't exist. Well, I mean, they did.
They exist. Right?
They were in the figment of our imagination at this point.
Not like pot shops and liquor stores which stayed open.
Which were essential, unlike gyms. But I'm working out one night and I remember saying to my buddy, I said, we need attorneys to stand for us. Where are the attorneys? And I remember looking in the mirror and seeing myself. Like, okay, I'm an attorney. I can do this. And so we started with suing Jay Inslee on the COVID mandates, represented you and a couple of other legislatures to make sure you got to do the people's business on the floor. What a crazy notion. You get to show up to work and do your job. I guess you were honest on that.
Some would say.
But before that, I came up here 9 years ago to the city of Pasco to work at the Hanford Nuclear Facility as an environmental attorney. And that's where I cut my teeth. Before Hanford, I sued the EPA in DC. I've got a specialized law degree in environmental law and policy and energy. I went to Energy Northwest for 3 years, helped start the permitting process for small modular nuclear technology. And so that's where I foresaw myself pre-COVID. And then we see this government run amok, taking our rights, and I really wanted to fight for my kids. So 3 years ago, we started Silent Majority Foundation, and we really tee off on protecting each person's right to exist.
And so essential. I mean, the people who are watching will remember just how out of control the state government got during the COVID shutdowns. And obviously the outgoing bumbling governor acted like a dictator for almost 3 years, and it was miserable. So it was really important the work you did there. I should tell everyone we are at the Hyatt Regency in Bellevue right now for the Washington State Republican Party's annual fall dinners tonight, and Pete's going to be one of the featured people speaking to the group. Pete, you are in a race now. It was kind of a tight three-way in the primary. Of course, Washington, we've got a top two primary system, so you and a fairly left-wing guy made it through the primary and will be facing off in November. And your opponent is clearly a progressive, and he even brags about continuing the work of the outgoing Attorney General, Ferguson, who does not rank very high in anybody's books here in Washington, and is basically trying to cast himself, I think, as a new generation's Barack Obama. Not great for constitutional rights. So tell me what path you see yourself taking in the campaign between now and November 5th.
Well, the easiest way to distinguish myself, as you just said, is, Nick is really hyper-focused on Bob's legacy. Those are his words, not mine. He said he's got a great legacy.
Not all legacies are good.
Well, in his mind, this one is. And to your point, there are so many people cross-sectional, not just Republicans, who are fed up with Bob Ferguson, what he's done, whether it's with the chicken and tuna checks, whether it's with other so-called people's rights actions where it really doesn't benefit the people, but it looks good on paper. And so, Nick is really running hard on Bob's legacy. He was Jay Inslee's personal attorney, so he was actually part of the vetting process for many judges in the early Inslee phase. So you look at those judges and wonder what they're thinking. Well, he was one of the ones that put a stamp of approval on that with Governor Inslee. Those are a couple things that distinguish me. He runs that he was hard on crime as a prosecutor. He actually said in an NPR article that he wanted to be softer on sentencing. That would give people the opportunity to recover post-recidivism and that sort of thing. And so I've been very clear. You've seen my socials, you've commented on them, you've liked them. I go down to 3rd and Pike where the best is happening. I go up to 12th and Jackson. I go talk. You and I talked with Henry.
That's right.
At Henry's restaurants. People who are losing their livelihood because the state won't stand and do its job. That's the difference of me and Nick Brown.
Yeah, and not just their livelihoods, but their lives. I mean, the young teenage girl was killed in the Alderwood Mall by this punk wannabe gangster, and you know, the legacy of Ferguson that your opponent is carrying forward does very little to fight that kind of crime in our state. So I guess another point I want to get your thoughts on is part of the legacy of the outgoing state attorney general is secretiveness, furtiveness, hidden policy making and policy enforcement. I know that a part of your platform is to be more transparent. Talk about an attorney general who would be open with the public instead of secretive and sneaking around.
Well, we have about 3 legs we can stand on with that. The first is, the most recent issue was with the initiatives. As you know, you were part of that process. Brian Haywood and the Let's Go Washington folks found out by accident, or pure luck, however you want to call that, by a reporter who wasn't reporting on that case, that their case was to be heard in 2 hours before the Washington State Supreme Court. Now, as a lawyer, for me to get there, it takes months. It's not something that just happened overnight. It took time to get there. And so the fact that they weren't made aware of that issue and that action that they had heavily invested in, that's problematic. The governor or the attorney general and his counsel should have notified them. And eventually they did, again, after in the briefing, but didn't tell them about the briefing. So it's crazy.
They said it in the briefing. They hadn't notified the parties.
And so there's that issue. And then there are the issues. My big pet peeve is as someone who's requested public records, one, the system's broken. I have to send a check in, and then I get either a thumb drive or a CD-ROM. It's like, I found a CD-ROM somewhere, and it's like a USB, and I don't even know if it's the right USB. I mean, so why is our government, specifically the Attorney General's office, other agencies will send me a cloud drive, why are they doing this where it's so laborsome and cumbersome for you and I to get their information? And then, I'm sure you've seen this too, when you get it, it's fully redacted. You get, the letterhead, Office of Attorney General. I know I requested it from you. And so that to me is highly problematic. I want to work, I tell people this, first part of the agency I look at is what does our Public Records Act department look like? Is it 2 people in a basement, with like toxic mold, or is it, and I'm sure the answer is not the second, but 40 people that are actually doing their job? I don't think it's probably somewhere in between. I'm being a little facetious, but I really want to make sure that team is well supported and say, hey, look, let's be as transparent as possible. I understand there are certain things you got to keep under attorney-client privilege, but let's use that at the least level possible. Let's not just use every single word as that. So I want to be more transparent. And then Bob Ferguson does his press releases. I think I heard Brian say what Haywood say basically 1.8 a week. What about the press conferences where people like you and I can come up and ask questions, not just the press, but the public? I think that's the engagement people are desperately lacking and they need, and I want to give to them.
Yeah, and I think that transparency is something that your opponent simply cannot credibly talk about, because part of the outgoing Attorney General's legacy is that secretiveness and that operating in the dark, and it's just stunning to me that anyone would say that's a legacy that they want to continue. Anyway, we could go on for hours, but Pete, tell people how to get in touch with you, how to get on your website, how to do all the things to help get you across the line in November.
Everything, whether it's the website or X or Facebook or Instagram, Serrano4AG, that's SERRANOFORAG.com, on X, whatever. Our social media presence is growing. I try to keep it live. Like I said, I'll go to Third and Pike and shoot a video at 1 a.m. And
your opponent won't do that, and the other guy certainly, the outgoing guy would never do that.
Well, I'll tell you, Pasco certainly, and this might shock you, Jim, isn't as close as like, 3rd or 5th and Pike or something like that. It might shock you geographically. It's only 300 miles or whatever it is. And so, yeah.
Well, and a world away. But we really believe that Pete would be a needed change in how our state government works. So anything you can do to help Pete Serrano, promote him, talk about him to your neighbors and family and friends. We need to get an Attorney General who will fight crime, protect constitutional rights, and do it openly, not hidden in the dark.
Real
Pete,
simple.
As always, it's great to talk to you.
My pleasure.
We'll talk again soon. Until then, stay strong and be well.